The acid rain fell in sheets across Ridgefront Nexus, washing the chrome-plated sidewalks in a sickly yellow glow. Pedestrians scurried beneath reinforced umbrellas, their exosuits humming against the caustic downpour. Above the city, massive air scrubbers churned ineffectually against the toxic clouds, producing only small pockets of breathable atmosphere that the wealthy could afford to inhabit. In the middle levels of the city, where the middle class and working poor shared cramped quarters, Billy's Sky Diner glowed like a beacon. Its neon sign flickered against the perpetual gloom, promising hot meals and a brief respite from the corrosive elements outside. The diner sat perched on the edge of a defunct airship dock, its windows looking out over the vast industrial sprawl below and the gleaming spires of the upper city above. Inside, Cora Jensen moved with practiced efficiency between the chrome-topped tables, her uniform, a reinforced apron armor over standard-issue environmental gear, bore the insignia of Billy's, though the original Billy had sold the establishment decades ago. The current owner, Wayne Beaksler, had maintained the name for its nostalgic appeal, though he had gutted much of the charm that had once made the diner special. "Order up for table 7, called the cook, sliding a plate of vat-grown protein fashioned to look like a 20th-century hamburger onto the service counter. Cora nodded, tucking a strand of her dark hair back beneath her service cap. She was 28, though the environmental stressors of Ridgefront had aged her face beyond her years. Still, there was a quiet dignity in her movements, a careful attention to detail that set her apart from the other servers who treated their jobs as mere stepping stones to something better. For Cora, there was no something better. Not since the industrial collapse had wiped out her family's savings and sent her grandfather to an early grave. All she had left of him was a memory crystal containing his final words and the small wooden box where she kept her most precious possessions. That, and his creed, which she had adopted as her own. Do what's right, not what's easy. Stay humble, work hard, and leave the world better than you found it. These days, leaving anything better seemed like a fantasy. But Cora still tried to live by those words in small ways, an extra portion for the night shift factory workers, a free coffee for the municipal waste technicians, a kind word for anyone who seemed to need it. After her shift, she would return to her tiny single-room habitat unit where her only companion, a reconditioned maintenance robot she had reprogrammed and named Smokey, would greet her with a mechanical purr. The cat-sized robot had been destined for the scrap heap when Cora had found it, damaged and abandoned behind the diner. She had spent 6 months' worth of spare credits and countless hours restoring it to functionality. Wayne had called it a waste of resources. "You'll never get back what you put into that thing," he'd said, eyeing the robot with distaste. But Smokey was worth every credit and minute to Cora, in a world that valued utility above all else. She treasured the small joy of caring for something that needed her. The diner had its usual mix of patrons that evening, factory supervisors grabbing dinner before the night shift, delivery couriers taking a break from their routes, a few off-duty security personnel from the upper city. At the corner booth, a group of mid-level corporate types were celebrating some minor promotion, their laughter artificially loud in the otherwise subdued atmosphere. As Cora refreshed their synthahol, the front door chimed. A gust of acidic wind blew in, carrying with it a figure that caused the ambient conversation to stutter and fade. The dragon was massive, even hunched over as he was. His scales, once iridescent green according to biology texts, were dull and pitted from acid exposure. One wing was partially folded against his back, the other hung at an awkward angle, clearly injured. His tail dragged behind him, leaving a wet trail on the chrome tiles. But it was the eyes that captured Cora's attention, amber with vertical pupils. clouded with exhaustion, but still alert. Still scanning the room with the careful assessment of a soldier in potentially hostile territory. Dragons were rare in Ridgefront. Most had retreated to their ancestral territories after the resource wars, maintaining an uneasy alliance with humans but generally keeping to themselves. Those who remained in human cities often served in specialized military units or worked as consultants for large corporations, their natural affinity for complex systems making them valuable despite lingering prejudice. This dragon wore no corporate insignia, no military identification. His only adornment was a tattered weather cloak designed for his species and a small metallic tag hanging from one horn, a veteran's marker. The silence in the diner stretched uncomfortably. Wayne emerged from the back office, his face hardening at the sight of the newcomer. "Oh, we don't serve street lizards," he said loudly. "You'll have to move along." The dragon made no move to leave. Instead, he reached beneath his cloak and produced a small credit chip. "I only need hot water," he said, his voice a rumbling bass that seemed to vibrate the glassware. "And perhaps a scrap of bread, if you can spare it." Wayne crossed his arms. "Hot water costs the same as anything else on the menu, and we don't have scraps. Either order something proper or find somewhere else to drip on the floor." Cora watched the exchange with a tightening in her chest. The dragon's posture, his careful conservation of energy, the way his eyes darted to the exits, she recognized these signs. Her grandfather had displayed similar behaviors after returning from the Eastern conflict, before he'd found work and stability again. "I'll handle this table, Wayne," she said, stepping forward before she could reconsider. Wayne's eyes narrowed, but he had other customers to attend to, and the corporate group was signaling for another round. With a dismissive gesture, he turned away. Cora approached the dragon, who had settled his massive frame into a booth designed for humans. His tail curled awkwardly around the table base. "What can I get you?" she asked. The dragon placed his credit chip on the table. It was old, the kind issued to veterans after the Nexus defense. The balance display flickered weakly, barely enough for a cup of water at Billy's inflated prices. "Just hot water," he repeated. "As hot as your systems can make it." Cora nodded and returned to the service station. Instead of processing the order as requested, she input a full meal, protein stew with extra portions, a basket of synthetic wheat rolls, and a large carafe of water heated to near boiling. The cook raised an eyebrow when the order appeared on his screen. "Table 9, that's the drag, isn't it?" "Yes," Cora said simply, offering no explanation. When she returned with the tray, the dragon's eyes widened fractionally. "There must be a mistake," he rumbled. "I only ordered—" "The kitchen had extra," Cora said, setting down the food. "It would go to waste otherwise. The water's the only thing on your bill." It was a lie, and from the dragon's expression, he knew it. But he also understood the kindness being offered and the risk she was taking. "Thank you," he said, the words formal but sincere. "It has been some time since I've eaten properly." Cora nodded and turned to leave, but paused when the dragon spoke again. "May I know the name of the one who shows such kindness to a stranger?" "Cora," she said. "Cora Jensen." The dragon inclined his head in a formal gesture. "I am Exxon Traver, formerly of the 87th Mixed Species Combat Division." He hesitated, then added, "Your grandfather fought in the Eastern conflict?" Cora blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" The dragon's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "You have the look of someone who understands what it means to rebuild after service. It's in the eyes." Before Cora could respond, Wayne's voice cut across the diner. "Jensen, table 3 needs attention." With a final nod to the dragon, Cora returned to her duties. From the corner of her eye, she watched as Exxon consumed the meal with careful, measured movements, savoring each bite as if it might be his last good meal for some time, which, she realized with a pang, it probably would be. When he finished, the dragon left his credit chip on the table and limped toward the exit. As he passed Cora, he paused, with a movement too quick for others to notice. He pressed something into her palm, a small metallic object, warm from his body heat. "For when you need to remember why it matters," he murmured. And then he was gone, back into the acid rain. Cora slipped the object into her pocket without examining it. She cleared the dragon's table, processed his meager payment for the hot water, and covered the remainder of the bill from her own account. If Wayne noticed the discrepancy in the day's receipts, she would claim a calculation error. It wasn't until her shift ended, as she trudged through the corrosive drizzle toward her habitat unit, that Cora examined what the dragon had given her. It was a scale tag, a small piece of dragon scale set in a simple metal frame. Such tokens were sometimes given by dragons to those who had earned their respect or gratitude. This one bore an engraving, "Honor in the small things." Cora added it to her wooden box that night, alongside her grandfather's memory crystal and a faded photograph of her family before the collapse. Smokey curled against her side, mechanical systems humming softly as she drifted into uneasy sleep. She didn't realize that someone had captured a vid of her interaction with the dragon until midway through her shift the next day. One of the corporate diners had uploaded it to the Nexus with a caption, "Billy's server feeds street lizard on company dime. Owner says he knew nothing. Had dragon lover #bad business." The footage had gone viral in certain circles, particularly among anti-dragon groups and corporate forums where anything that threatened profit margins was treated as heresy. By evening, Wayne had seen it, and his reaction was predictable. "You're fired," he said flatly, cornering Cora in the supply room. "Clear out your locker and don't come back." "It was one meal, Wayne," Cora argued, though she had anticipated this outcome. "He was a veteran." "I don't care if he was the Dragon Emperor himself," Wayne snapped. "You gave away product without authorization. That's theft." And now the feed is full of comments saying, "We support street lizards and veteran handouts." Do you know what that does to our corporate client base? Cora looked past Wayne to the main dining area, where several of her regular customers were studiously avoiding her gaze. No one would speak up for her. No one would risk their own comfort for a principal. "I'll get my things," she said quietly, as she packed her few personal items from the staff locker. Cora's hand brushed the scale tag in her pocket. Honor in the small things. She had done what her grandfather would have expected of her. That would have to be enough. The next weeks were difficult. Jobs were scarce in Ridgefront, especially for someone whose profile now carried a termination flag for unauthorized resource allocation, corporate speak for giving away food to someone in need. Cora burned through her meager savings quickly, covering habitat fees and basic sustenance. She sold her backup environmental suit and several other non-essential items to extend her runway. Smokey's maintenance became a luxury she could barely afford, but she would sooner go hungry herself than deactivate her only companion. The little robot seemed to sense her distress, staying close and using minimal power. Cora began taking gig work, delivery runs, waste sorting, whatever came through the public job boards. The pay was insufficient and inconsistent, but it kept her afloat. Barely. During one particularly desperate week, she found herself in the lower levels of Ridgefront, delivering packages to areas where even the acid rain seemed heavier, more caustic. It was there, in an alley between decommissioned factory blocks, that she spotted a familiar form huddled beneath a makeshift shelter of scavenged materials. Exxon Travers' condition had deteriorated. His scales were duller. His breathing labored. The injured wing was now bound against his body with strips of weather-resistant fabric, clearly a self-administered treatment. He recognized her immediately, his amber eyes brightening momentarily. "You're the kind server," he said, his voice weaker than she remembered. "Why are you in this part of the Nexus?" Cora explained her situation briefly. The dragon listened, his expression growing troubled. "You lost your position because of me," he stated. "I did not intend to cause harm." "You didn't," Cora assured him. "It was my choice." From that day forward, whenever Cora had work in the lower levels, she would bring something for Exxon: clean water, food when she could spare it, occasionally medical supplies scrounged from community dispensaries. It wasn't much, and she knew it wasn't enough to truly help him recover, but it was what she could offer. In return, the dragon shared stories of his service, of the mixed species units that had defended Ridgefront and other human settlements during the resource wars. He spoke of human comrades who had fought alongside him, of battles won and lost, of the slow erosion of veteran support programs as the wars faded from public memory. "They remember us in monuments," he told her once, "but forget us in policy." One evening, as Cora was returning to her habitat after an especially grueling day of sorting industrial waste, her personal comm pinged with a notification. It was from the Nexus feed. Another video had gone viral, this one showing her sharing her meager lunch with Exxon in the lower levels. The comments were even more vitriolic than before, accusing her of species treachery and resource wasting. She shut off the comm and continued home, too exhausted to care about the opinions of strangers. But when she reached her habitat block, the entry panel flashed red instead of green. Access denied. A text notification informed her that her lease had been terminated due to community standards violations, a vague charge that could mean anything but almost certainly referred to her association with a street lizard. With nowhere else to go and rain beginning to fall, Cora made her way to a 24-hour public shelter in the mid-levels. These facilities were overcrowded and dangerous, but they were required to accept anyone with a citizen ID, regardless of species or status. As she settled onto a hard bench, Smokey hidden in her bag to avoid theft, Cora felt something she had managed to avoid until now: despair. She had lost everything: job, home, reputation. For what? A single act of kindness that had changed nothing in the grand scheme of things. Her hand found the scale tag in her pocket. Honor in the small things. The words seemed hollow now, a luxury for those who could afford principles. She slept fitfully, waking at every sound in the crowded shelter. When morning came, she used the public facilities to clean up as best she could, then headed out to look for day labor. She needed credits, and quickly, if she was going to find new housing before night fell again. The sky was still dark, the eternal acid clouds blocking the sunrise, but the rain had stopped temporarily. Cora walked toward the labor dispatch center, her steps leaden with fatigue. She was so focused on her immediate problems that she didn't notice the unusual quiet of the streets, the absence of the normal morning rush. It wasn't until she rounded the corner onto the main thoroughfare that led to Billy's Sky Diner that Cora stopped short, disbelieving what she saw. They stood in perfect formation, thousands of them, lining both sides of the street, humans and dragons, standing shoulder to shoulder, wing to arm. All wore military uniforms, some current, some from conflicts decades past. They stood at parade rest, silent and immobile, their eyes fixed forward, and they formed a path, leading directly to the entrance of Billy's. Cora stood frozen, unable to comprehend what she was seeing. A soft mechanical nudge from her bag reminded her of Smokey's presence. The little robot had poked its head out, optical sensors whirring as it processed the scene. "What is this?" Cora whispered, though she knew Smokey couldn't answer. As if in response, the ranks of soldiers straightened simultaneously. A figure detached from the front line and approached her, a human woman in the dress uniform of a high-ranking military commander. Her insignia identified her as Commander Mayton Traver of the Joint Species Defense Force. "Cora Jensen?" the commander asked, though it was clear she already knew the answer. Cora nodded, speechless. "I'm Commander Mayton Traver," the woman said. "Exxon Traver is my brother." Brother? The term was honorary. Of course, a designation given to members of mixed-species combat units who had saved each other's lives or demonstrated exceptional loyalty. Such bonds were rare but respected throughout the military. "He's alive," Cora said quickly, fearing the worst. "I saw him yesterday in the lower levels. He's injured, but we know where he is." Commander Traver interrupted gently. "A medical team is with him now. What you're seeing here," she gestured to the silent ranks of soldiers, "is for you." "I don't understand." 20,000, Commander Traver said. "That's how many soldiers are here today. Human and Dragon, active and veteran." Word spread quickly after your story appeared on the feeds. Not the negative version that went viral, but the true story that followed. The one about a waitress who continued to help a veteran even after losing her job for it. Cora shook her head, still confused. "But I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have—" "No," the commander said firmly. "They wouldn't. And they didn't. You did." She turned toward Billy's diner, where Wayne Beaksler could be seen through the windows, his face pale as he stared at the military formation outside his establishment. "We thought it was time for a demonstration of what honor actually looks like. With that," Commander Traver turned and walked toward the diner. After a moment's hesitation, Cora followed. As they passed between the ranks of soldiers, each service member saluted in perfect unison, a gesture of respect usually reserved for high-ranking officers or heroes of exceptional valor. Inside the diner, Wayne had retreated behind the service counter. The few early customers sat in stunned silence. Commander Traver approached the owner, her posture rigid with controlled anger. "Wayne Beaksler," she said, her voice carrying throughout the now silent diner. "Do you know who Exxon Traver is?" Wayne swallowed visibly. "Some street liz, some Dragon veteran," he corrected himself quickly, eyeing the commander's insignia. "Lieutenant Colonel Exxon Traver," Commander Traver corrected. "Recipient of the Stellar Cross for Valor, awarded for saving an entire human settlement during the Nexus defense. He single-handedly held the North Ridge against enemy forces while civilian transports evacuated, suffering injuries that ended his active service career." Her eyes narrowed. "That street lizard saved over 5,000 human lives, including, as it happens, your parents. The Beaksler family was on Transport 7, which would have been shot down if the ridge had fallen." Wayne's face drained of color. After his discharge, Colonel Traver worked with veterans' rehabilitation programs until budget cuts eliminated them 3 years ago. He used his own resources to support other veterans until he had nothing left. And when he came to you, hungry and injured, asking only for hot water, you would have sent him back into the acid rain. Commander Traver turned to Cora. "In our family, our military family, we don't forget those who show honor when others show contempt." She reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a small box. This belongs to you now." Cora accepted the box with trembling hands. Inside, nestled in protective fabric, was a stellar cross, the highest military honor awarded for valor. The metal gleamed in the harsh diner lighting, its significance overwhelming. "I can't accept this," Cora said. "It's his. He earned it. He wants you to have it." Commander Travers said. His exact words were, "Give it to someone who remembers that honor lives in actions, not monuments." "That's you, Cora Jensen." Tears blurred Cora's vision. She closed the box carefully, holding it against her chest. Commander Travers turned back to Wayne, who seemed to have aged years in the past few minutes. "Outside this diner are 20,000 soldiers who now know how you treated one of our most decorated veterans, and how you punished the one person who showed him kindness. I imagine your business reputation might suffer somewhat." Her smile was cold. Consequences tend to find those who forget the meaning of respect. With that, the commander snapped to attention, saluted Cora once more, and exited the diner. Through the windows, Cora could see the formation beginning to disperse, soldiers returning to their duties or their civilian lives, having made their point with their silent presence. Wayne didn't meet Cora's eyes as she left the diner. She didn't expect an apology, and she didn't receive one. Some lessons couldn't change certain hearts. What happened next occurred with the swift efficiency of a military operation. By evening, the footage of the soldiers' formation and Commander Travers' confrontation with Wayne had spread across every feed in Ridgefront and beyond. Billy's Sky Diner was inundated with negative reviews and canceled corporate accounts. Within 3 days, Wayne announced he was selling the establishment and relocating to another city. Meanwhile, Cora found herself at the center of unexpected attention. Veterans groups reached out with offers of housing and employment. Her citizen profile was quietly cleared of the termination flag, though she had no intention of returning to service work. Most surprisingly, a coalition of interspecies nonprofit organizations contacted her with a proposal. They wanted to convert the now vacant diner into a community kitchen serving veterans of all species, with Cora as its director. "We've secured funding for 5 years of operations," explained the human representative, a social worker named Maya. "The property owner has agreed to a favorable lease arrangement, given the circumstances. All we need is someone with the right perspective to lead it." "I don't have management experience," Cora protested. "You have something more important," said her dragon counterpart, a social services coordinator named Thelian. "You have integrity. The rest can be learned." Exxon Travers himself endorsed the plan from his hospital bed, where he was finally receiving proper treatment for his injuries. "The Nexus needs more places where honor isn't measured by profit," he told Cora when she visited. "Build this, and they will come." And so, 3 months after being fired for giving a meal to a homeless dragon, Cora Jensen stood in the renovated space that had once been Billy's Sky Diner. The chrome had been replaced with warmer materials. The harsh lighting softened. The new sign read simply, "Jensen's," though that had not been her idea. "It's your vision," Maya had insisted. "It should bear your name." On opening day, a line formed before dawn, veterans and civilians, humans and dragons and other species, all waiting patiently for the doors to open. Cora, dressed in a simple uniform that bore no corporate logos, only a small pin combining the human and dragon military insignias, welcomed each guest personally. The menu was simple but nourishing, with prices set on a sliding scale according to ability to pay. Those who could afford more were encouraged to pay forward meals for those who couldn't. No one was turned away. regardless of species, status, or ability to pay. Smokey had been joined by other reconditioned robots, all programmed to assist with operations while providing a mechanical purr that many patrons found soothing. The little robot had a special perch near the main counter, where it could greet guests and receive the occasional appreciative pat. In a small display case near the entrance, Cora had placed 3 items: the Alliance flag that had once flown over joint human-dragon military operations, the Stellar Cross that Exxon had insisted she keep, and a collection of scale tags contributed by Dragon veterans who had heard her story. Together, they served as a reminder of the establishment's purpose, not merely to feed bodies, but to nourish the connections between all who had served and sacrificed. Cora still lived modestly, taking only a minimal salary from the operation and reinvesting the rest in expanded services. She had moved to a slightly larger habitat unit, primarily to accommodate the growing number of mechanical companions she was rehabilitating in her spare time. She rarely spoke of the events that had led to Jensen's creation. When asked, she would simply say that she had done what anyone should do when faced with someone in need. The full story circulated anyway, growing somewhat in the telling, but its essence remained true. A simple act of kindness had rippled outward, changing not just individual lives, but the community itself. On quiet evenings, after the last patron had left and the kitchen was clean, Cora would sometimes sit at the corner table, the same one where Exxon had first received her kindness, and open her wooden box. Inside lay her grandfather's memory crystal, the family photograph, the scale tag, and now the Stellar Cross. Tokens of a life defined not by grand gestures or public acclaim, but by quiet honor in the small things. Outside, the acid rain would fall as it always had. The air scrubbers would churn ineffectually against the toxic clouds, and the stark divisions of Ridgefront Nexus would persist. But within the walls of Jensen's, something had changed. A small pocket of warmth had formed in the chrome-cold city, a place where dignity was not a commodity, but a birthright, freely given and gratefully received. And if one small patch of ground could be reclaimed from indifference, perhaps others could follow. This was the hope that Cora carried as she locked up each night and made her way home through the corrosive drizzle. Smokey tucked safely in her bag, the scale tag warm in her pocket. Honor in the small things. One meal, one gesture, one moment of seeing another's humanity, or Dragon.The when others looked away. The ripples continued to spread, touching lives she would never know, creating possibilities that had not existed before. It was enough. It had to be enough. And somehow, against all odds, it was. In the year that followed, similar establishments began to appear in other sectors of Ridgefront and even in neighboring cities. Some were directly inspired by Jensen's. Others arose independently from the same recognition that community transcended species and status. A network formed, resources were shared, and slowly, incrementally, the fabric of society began to reweave itself around these nodes of compassion. Exxon Traver recovered enough to become a regular presence at Jensen's, though his wing would never fully heal. He worked with Cora to establish a veterans advocacy program that successfully lobbied for the reinstatement of support services. Commander Matan Traver, meanwhile, used her influence within the Joint Species Defense Force to ensure that active military personnel understood the importance of honoring all veterans, regardless of species. The original viral video that had cost Cora her job was eventually archived in the Nexus Historical Society's collection on inflection points in interspecies relations, a small footnote in the larger story of how society began to rebuild not just its infrastructure after the resource wars, but its soul. And through it all, Cora Jensen continued to serve meals, offer kindness, and repair broken mechanical companions, guided by her grandfather's simple creed: do what's right, not what's easy. Stay humble, work hard, and leave the world better than you found it. One meal, one act of compassion, 20,000 soldiers, countless lives changed. The rain still fell, but now, in more places than before, there was shelter from the acid, warmth against the cold, and dignity in the face of indifference. Honor in the small things. It was enough. It had always been enough.